Randy, this is episode 4. We haven't shot episode 3 yet.
Okay.
But this is episode 4.
Okay, good.
We shoot 3.
Yeah, we're going to shoot 3, shoot 5, shoot 10.
Right.
Let's shoot episode 27 next.
That one's tough.
No,
I can't.
okay.
We need future readings for that.
Gotcha.
But I had some questions for you.
Okay.
And I think I wanted to pick your brain on it really quick. So first of all, let's just talk about the student loans just first.
Mm-hmm.
Let's warm up there.
Okay.
So I'm effective. I'm technically being affected positively on student loans, and for no bias at all, I'm thrilled.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that is a biased thing. But what is your opinion on this? Like, what is my concern is the granted, it is affecting me positively, but I'm concerned about what does the bill fall on? I know that the way the books are lent out to people, I know how the teachers are paid. I know that there's a financial structure that the colleges have been dependent upon to be paid.
Mm-hmm.
So how does this shakedown kind of affect the whole thing?
Sure. So, the student borrowed money from some entity. I don't know exactly where these student loans come. If they come from the government, they come from banks, or a combination of both. But some entity lent the student the money, and then the school in turn got the money to pay for the education, books, and maybe even room and board. So there's some entity out there that has a loan or a receivable on their books waiting to get paid back from the student at some point in the future. So when Biden says he's going to cancel $300 billion in student loan debt, the person that incurred the debt no longer has to pay back. I guess they're talking about $10,000 $10,000 per person, but the entity that lent the money, I'm sure they still want the money. So if it was a bank or some other kind of non-governmental entity, they probably want to get their $10,000 back. And if it's the government that's going to be backing all this, basically we're shifting $300 billion worth of loans that were due by individuals that borrowed the money and got the benefit of the education. Now we're shifting $300 billion worth of loans to the federal government that have to be paid back by all of us as taxpayers, which I think that's the problem that everybody has is, hey, I didn't go to school. I didn't take out that loan, or I went to school and paid back my loan. Why am I paying back your loan? Or if your education was so great, why don't you pay for it yourself? Is some of the things I've read online. I read some comment the other day, just a little bit about it, and I typically don't go to Twitter and read some of the ridiculous comments people put out there, because some of them are, quite frankly, stupid, ridiculous, and they're so uninformed. But one of the ones that that really caught my eye was, I'm going to paraphrase, it's like, to all the people out there that, are having a problem with, having with people getting their student loans canceled, and you're a Christian, well, Jesus died on the cross for your sins and cancel your debt. Well, he made the decision to get up on the cross, and he carried that debt. He canceled that debt. He took it on. He didn't transfer it to somebody else, So, I read something else where somebody was saying, well, if you were benefited, if you're one of the wealthy people or one of the big corporations that benefited from the tax cuts, over the last few years, then you're a hypocrite for not, thinking this is a good deal or something like that. Well, everybody, it wasn't just rich people that got tax cuts. I've been doing taxes for almost 30 years. The tax brackets and the tax rates went down for every single person. Every single bracket went down. So everybody got it. It wasn't just rich people and big corporations. Everybody got a tax cut. So here again, there's a lot of opinions out there. There's a lot of things being said. But basically, at the end of the day, somebody, some entity, the government lent the money out to somebody to go to school, and that person said, hey, I'm signing up for this debt. I'm going to pay it back. Now their debt's being forgiven, but if I seriously doubt that if a bank was the one that funded that student loan, the bank has shareholders that want to get paid back. They're not going to write off X number of dollars in student debt. So I'm sure the federal government's going to pick up the tab for this, which means we as taxpayers picking up the tab. And here again, that's where I think the people that have a problem with this, that's the problem. It's like I now am picking up another $300 billion in debt that I didn't incur. So. But
go ahead. Sorry.
But here again, we have that going on at all levels. There's a lot of, we went from 43 years ago of only having $1 trillion in national debt. Now we're up over $30 trillion in national debt. So, there's a lot of money that's been put into our system that we're all collectively having to pay back. I'm not saying that that's a reason just to keep spending and borrowing money and keep forgiving everybody's debt, but at some point, enough is enough.
Right. And I guess one of my concerns about it was I feel like it's bear with me. I feel like my experience in being in college, in and out for like the last 10 years. I feel like the loan system is really predatory. I was enrolled, I had a Pell Grant. And as I was going through the system, you have to do this like loan counseling, they call it. And like that loan counseling is not like at least from the college I went to, it wasn't a person. There wasn't like someone sat down. I wasn't put through like at least a 1 week course with a quiz and all this stuff. It was just a matter of like, you agreed that you read this, you agree. I think there was a short quiz actually, but like you were able to take it as many times as you want until you just passed it. It wasn't like if you failed, I think you should be passed on to a counselor. But
yeah,
I only took the loans I think once ever, and I think like it came out to like $10,000, and it was easy. It was so easy for me to get $10,000. Like, and if I wanted $10,000 for a car today, that would be really hard for me to do, because my credit's not great. If I wanted to get into a house, getting a loan for like even a business loan, even if I had a great idea, I'm luckier to get money from a venture capitalist than I am a bank right now. So, but a student loan, I can get that money right now. Like, I literally can get that money right now. Like I can start college right now because the classes just started, and in 1 month I can get a chunk of change from the U.S. government, or I guess the U.S. government, or whoever's going to give it to me. But it's easy. Like, like, I mean, it sounds like '08 to me, like with the housing market. It sounds almost identical, does it not, by how easy it was to get loans?
It was definitely easy to get loans back then. And yeah, I here again, I don't have any children, and so I haven't kept up with the whole student loan process. We've helped certain clients fill out those FAFSA or FAFSA, whatever they're called, forms for student for college education loans and that kind of stuff. But in terms of the process, I'm not really aware of it, but it sounds like it is very. I never hear of anybody getting turned down for a student loan. So,
I think
unless their parents make too much money, But to your point, it probably is very easy to get a student loan, and I think what's happening is people are encouraged to go to college and get a degree. And because that's the track everybody should be on. And I'm not saying there are certain college degrees that are great. So people go to college, they don't really know what they want to do, so they just start taking classes, and they wind up in a degree that when they get out with a 4-year degree, they start looking around for jobs, and they're going, well, I can't really find a job that's going to pay me anything. Or pay me well, and I'm not really making that much more than minimum wage. What I spent the last 4 years going to college, So then they become discouraged, and then they quit paying the student loan back, or they're going to take years and years and years to pay it off, and what they're paying for, they really get no value out of. So, I think that there should be a lot more focus and attention paid on, can you actually make any money with the degree that you're going to get? What's that? Thinking forward into the future, I'm going to go get this degree. Okay, what's my job prospects look like with this degree? And am I going to have enough money to live and pay back my student loan? If you're not going to have enough money to pay your living expenses and pay back your student loan, you probably shouldn't get that degree.
I think they do have some systems where like Bright Outlook, like they have better systems in place for like what they predict is going to be. Like I think like IT was a big one at one point. Yeah, I was just curious what you think, because I mean, like it's like $80 billion or something forgiven, which
300 trillion. No, 300 billion.
It was 300 billion. Okay, well, I'm getting confused with the IRS number.
Yep.
But that's 300 billion.
It's real money.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot of money. That's I mean, it's quite. I can make quite the wave.
I'm not happy about it because I don't why am I? I mean, here again we're constantly deficit spending in this country every year, so I'm not happy about that every year either. But we need to get back to balancing our federal budget every year and get back to spending what we take in. And if we can't do that, we need to quit spending as much.
Well, Brennan, topic number two. Number two. Okay, so Biden came out, and I'm just going to read one of POTUS's tweets here, okay? He says, it's now law that big corporations pay a minimum of 15% tax on the profits they report to their shareholders, instead of getting away with paying $0 in federal income tax. So what is your opinion on this?
That's a great question. So, and I think it's there are accounting rules that, so for instance, there's revenue recognition seems to be a big hot topic, and so let's pretend I'm CEO of Amazon. Okay, I'm going to want the profits of the company that are reported for publicly traded company purposes to be as high as possible, because typically my bonus and my compensation is that's what my bonus and compensation is based on. So you have the financial accounting standards boards that write what we call in the accounting world FASBs. They have all these rules that govern revenue recognition, expense recognition, how quickly you have to recognize revenue, how quickly you have to recognize expenses, or how long you have to write things off for. Then you have Congress over here writing a whole different set of rules that we follow for tax purposes, and you have the IRS that's enforcing those. So you have two different sets of rules that companies have to follow. So they basically have to keep two sets of books. So they may have, like for instance, they may have depreciation is a big item that is a big variable when you have a company that's heavily investing into their they've invested a lot of money into their footprint. They've invested a lot of money in technology and a lot of money into vehicles and that kind of stuff. So let me give an example. So for tax purposes, Amazon goes out and buys one of those delivery trucks that you see that's probably kind of a box truck that you see delivering things to your house or your office. The IRS says that has to be written off in 5 years. So if they go out and spend $80,000 on a delivery truck in 5 years, that's fully written off for tax purposes. For GAAP accounting purposes, what they do is they say, okay, this $80,000 van, this thing can last us 12 years. So for tax purposes, they wrote that van off in 5 years. For I'll say accounting purposes or GAAP accounting purposes or public company accounting purposes, it's taking 12 years to write that $80,000 van off. So then also, if Amazon builds a warehouse, well, we all are aware that there's warehouses out there that last way longer than 39 years. So for tax purposes, Amazon, if it builds a new, let's say, 1 million square foot warehouse, for tax purposes, it writes that warehouse off in 39 years. There are some tax guidance out there that you can do what's called a cost segregation study and potentially write off part of that Amazon warehouse in 15 years or 7 years. So there's some tax guidance that allows you to get really aggressive on your depreciation. Well, that warehouse is probably going to last 60, 70, 80 years in real life purposes. So Amazon gets to write off on their accounting statements for public company reporting purposes, for GAAP accounting. It may say this is building as a 60, 75 year asset and write it off over that longer period. So you have tax rules that allow for quite often typically a faster write-off than what you're doing for real accounting purposes. So to me, eventually those things catch up. So let's say, for instance, that Amazon buys a van and they write it off for tax purposes in 5 years. So now they've got a van on the books that they've totally written off. Let's say they sell that van in 5 years for $35,000. Well, now they got to have to recognize $35,000 of income because they sold an asset that's worthless on the books. So eventually, the timing, when you go through enough years, it all kind of catches up. Mm-hmm. So to me, having these public companies pay a minimum of 15% tax on what they report to the shareholders, that's not fair. That to me is not fair. There needs to be some kind of an adjustment made. Then if they're going to pay tax on that, then when there needs to be some kind of true up in the future when they have all this income from selling off all these assets that rapidly depreciate. They already paid tax on it once because they had the way they had to keep their books for public company reporting purposes. Now they got to pay tax again because they're keeping their books a certain way for tax purposes. So to me, I don't think it's a fair tax at all.
Yeah, and would you say it's kind of worded a bit ambiguously, like the 50% shareholders? Because how is that actually like defined?
Well, it's a 15% tax that the company has to pay, minimum 15% tax, from what I read.
Just what they report, because I think I guess what I'm trying to say is like unearned income. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, isn't it something like that passes through the company as well? Like they'll say 50% in profits, but like. Could that just be like the increase in shares as well? Well,
you're kind of jumping on different topics.
Yeah.
So it's a 15% tax on the profits that they report for. So every quarter, all your publicly traded companies report their earnings.
Yeah.
And so what the government is saying is that the government thinks that. And it probably is happening, especially on growth companies that are new companies like an Amazon. Amazon's spending probably hundreds of billions of dollars on building out their warehouse footprint, buying vans and having a whole delivery system and spending a lot of money on their inventory tracking system as well. So they're investing a lot of money. And so they're probably not paying a lot of money in tax right now, but they're probably depreciating all this stuff over a significantly longer period than they're doing for taxes. So it looks like they're making all this money when they report to the shareholders quarterly in the Wall Street. They're making all this money, but they're not paying any tax. Well, that's eventually going to turn around. They're going to wind up having to pay taxes. And
so
I
get it. Okay,
that's why I think this is unfair, to those companies.
I get it.
And it's unfair. So it's ultimately unfair to the shareholders because then part of the money that would go to them as dividends is now that's going to the government taxes. So what's going to happen? The shareholders still want to make their money, and so the company's going to raise prices. So it's going to be just another kind of an inflationary financial transaction that's going to wind up costing the people at the lower end of the economic spectrum. It's going to wind up hitting them the hardest.
So I see kind of a trend here, like the what we just talked about, the student loan forgiveness,
mm-hmm.
and then this 50% tax, all kind of very like ambiguously. We don't realize how much inflation is caused by a lot
mm-hmm.
of these changes.
Well, that's the problem with you have people in Washington making decisions that they aren't capable of making. That's what it boils down to.
Well, right. Some of our lawmakers never even lived a day of my life, from what I understand. Like the people that write laws for people like me and you,
mm-hmm.
Never actually lived exactly like the kind of life that, at least I lived. You know what I mean?
They live in a bubble. They either aren't smart enough to understand that decisions have consequences, and they can't think about what the consequences of those decisions are and how they trickle down into the rest of us in the economy, or they don't care, So, but yeah, that's the problem with these people that are making these decisions is they in my opinion, most of them either aren't smart enough to understand what they're making a decision on, or they don't care.
Well, those were the only two topics I had.
Mm-hmm.
So, but thanks for taking my little financial brain questions.
No, you're welcome.
And, so appreciate it.
I may have gotten a little political and may express some of my political opinions, but I have opinions. We all have opinions, and I'm not saying mine are right, but mine are right for me, and mine are right for the reasons that I mentioned. And I hope that everybody doesn't get offended by my expressing them, but I think I've got a reasonable basis for them, and I just think that regardless of your party affiliation, regardless of how you believe, politically, you can't take away from the fact that we are over $30 trillion in debt. And it's not the Republicans, it's not the Democrats. We all did that. There's been different parties in the White House, different parties in Congress that allowed that to happen. So we're all responsible, and so we need to quit pointing fingers and blaming other people and try to find a solution to the problem so it doesn't keep growing. That's the problem. It just keeps growing and growing, and we're just kicking the can down the road. And the problem. The bigger it gets, the harder it is to solve.
I guess just to wrap up this podcast, then, I mean, to leave with a little bit of advice. I mean, in a world that's themed with inflation, I mean, how does one protect themselves from inflation?
Well, before we get there, in terms of, I think that it's important people to realize, this is just my opinion, but when you take a look back over history, I want to go back millennia, every great society has come and gone. The Egyptian Empire, the Roman Empire, the English Empire, the Persians, the Greeks, the Spanish, the French, the whoever, and every great society has come and gone. And as you get closer and closer to where we're at today in a timeline, the rise and fall has gotten shorter and shorter. So it's not, in my opinion, it's not so much how you protect yourself from inflation, it's how you protect yourself from, I won't use the word financial ruin, but there has to be a reckoning at some point, in my opinion. We can't just keep going like this. So it's going to become harder and harder to make money. Inflation is a real factor because as we keep printing more and more money, our dollar becomes less and less valuable. It means it can't go as far as it once did. So that means you either got to work harder, you got to spend less money, and you're going to have less. So to answer your question, how do you fight inflation? A couple ways. You can work harder, make more money. That's one way. But also, too, I think that we as Americans need to be more nimble. I think a lot of people have got themselves into financial arrangements that they don't, whether it be mortgages, car loans, student loans, whatever it is, that they don't have a lot of flexibility. They can't handle a lot. They can't handle a lot of stress, a financial stress to their cash flow. And if they have some kind of a hiccup, they don't have the resources, or they've got themselves maxed out in terms of expenses where they can't handle a significant downturn for a significant period of time. So
hiccups are expensive.
I mean,
rent's $2,000 around here.
So I think that everybody needs to take a look at living below their means. So spending everything you make on a monthly basis. And I know it's easier said than done. I'm not trying to minimize what people are going through. I understand inflation is there. I understand we went through a pandemic. I understand all these things. I just think that being in a position where you don't have any nest egg, being in a position where you spend everything you make, it's not a good position to be in. But if you're proactive, you may have to work two jobs if you want to continue the lifestyle, or you can't change. Maybe you wound up with more kids than you planned on, and you can't turn it back. You can't turn them in. You can't even get a refund. You have to take care of them.
Right. I mean, that's one of the unique, I think, situations we're dealing with right now. And I think at least this area of Florida, I know there's some other states right now where it could be really affordable. You could, the house you can get for $80,000 elsewhere, is going to cost $250,000, $500,000 here. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, even used cars, housing, two of the things we rely on the most are two of the hardest things to get right now, especially in Florida. It's just a really unique time. And we can talk more about that like off this podcast, but I'm just like, it's just a kind of a realization in myself lately, just like how, wow, it's a lot of work to be by yourself. You know, someone wants to be like just a single dad, single mom, just wants to live by herself. That is an astronomical goal, borderline unrealistic. You know, so. But anyways, Randy, if someone wants tax help, cash flow help, talk money.
Yeah, give us a call here at the office, 352-596-2883, or give us look us up on the web, suncoastcpagroup.com. There's a form there you can fill out to request an appointment. You know, and here again, we have offices in Brooksville and in Spring Hill, and we're open 8 to 5. But for those clients that can't make those hours, I meet clients after hours, weekends, whenever they need to meet, and so we can begin working together. So give us a call. Love to work with you. Love to share with you what we're doing here and find a way to help you out.
See ya.